Good afternoon and welcome. We've got for you this afternoon our Exploitation Prevention Awareness Bite Size. My name's Becca Hewitt and I'm the Chair of South Devon and Dartmoor Community Safety Partnership. Although we're hosting this from South Devon, it's obviously open to anybody that will find what we're going to be sharing this afternoon interesting. We are delighted that we've got so many very knowledgeable speakers with us this afternoon to share their information. This is designed as bite-sized, so it is just short bits of information across a whole host of different areas relating to exploitation prevention. We believe as a CSP and across the Safe Devon Partnership that it's absolutely essential that we could keep a focus on exploitation, and that as partner agencies you're kept up to date on what our current challenges are. So I'm going to ask delegates, if possible, to keep your cameras and microphones off while our speakers are presenting. We will have a 15-minute question and answer session at the end. So also to tell you, the session is recorded. So I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, Julie. Thank you.
Thanks, Becca. Afternoon all. My name is Julie Richards. I'm the Community Safety and Violence Prevention Lead at Devon County Council. I also chair Devon's Channel Panel. Channel is a voluntary, confidential early intervention programme that supports people who may be at risk of being drawn into terrorism. I've got a presentation to share, so just give me a moment while I bring it up onto the screen. I hope this will work. I've also got a video to play part way through it, so I'm really hoping that that works. We'll see. So just bear with me a second. It's telling me it's uploading. You probably can't see it your end yet.
We can see it now, Julie, thanks.
You can see it now. Lovely. Perfect. Okay, great. So Becca has asked me to talk about radicalisation. So that is what I'm going to do. So radicalisation is the process of a person subscribing to extremist ideology. This can include legitimising support for or use of terrorist violence. The majority of people who commit terrorism offences do so of their own agency and dedication to an ideological cause. So, what is ideology? Ideology is a set of beliefs or narratives that support a particular worldview, and an extremist ideology is intolerant of generally accepted values of society. Of course, not all extremist groups commit terrorist or violent acts. However, some groups pose particular threats, both online and offline. Earlier this year, the government published a new definition of extremism, acknowledging the role that extremism can play in creating the conditions for terrorism. So, ideology includes, I'm just bringing up the slides, it's a broad range of ideologies and narratives can draw people into terrorism. And the UK faces substantial risks from Islamist terrorism and extreme right-wing terrorism. It's important to note that in the southwest, the risk is greatest around extreme right-wing terrorism. Of course, conflicted and unclear extremist ideologies are also a concern for us. Established terrorist narratives exhibit common themes such as anti-Semitism, misogyny, anti-establishment, anti-LGBTQ+ grievances, or religious or ethnic superiority. Of course, conspiracy theories can also act as a gateway to radicalised thinking and sometimes violence. Given that we have a particular concern around extreme right-wing terrorist ideology in the southwest, I thought it might be helpful to give a little bit more information about the ways that that can be broken down. So you might have heard of cultural nationalism. So that is essentially the belief that Western culture is under threat from mass migration. Then there's white nationalism. That's a belief that mass migration from the non-white world and demographic change pose existential threat to white race and Western culture. Sometimes that's referred to as the Great Replacement theory. And then there's white supremacism. So that's the belief that the white race is biologically, culturally, and spiritually superior to all other races. There is, it's worth noting, a lot of overlap between those three different narratives. So how does radicalisation take place? So it's important to note that there is no single pathway to being radicalised. There are many factors which can either alone or combined lead to someone subscribing to extremist ideology and thereafter be potentially drawn into or become an advocate of terrorism. These factors often include exposure to radicalising influences, real and perceived grievances, often created or exacerbated through grievance narratives espoused by extremists, and a person's own susceptibility. What we have seen in recent years, and this is replicated across the Southwest and here locally, is a significant increase in the numbers of individuals being radicalised in the online space, and a growing proportion of those being children and young people. Back in March, the Home Office published figures which showed that 42 children aged under 17 were arrested last year for terrorist act offences. That's nearly 1 in 5 of the total number of people held for terror-related offences. It's the highest number since records began in 2002 and double the number 3 years ago. Jonathan Hall Casey, who's the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, said that the increase could be linked to isolated teenagers being radicalised in malign online spaces. So that is a particular concern for us. So as I've just said, really the digital world has become a game changer in terms of radicalisation. Extremist content is more accessible and has greater reach, and radicalisers can more easily find people who can be drawn into extremism and connect with them online. A few years ago, Safer Devon Partnership produced this short film, which I'm going to play because it's only just over a minute in length, and it highlights the growing concerns that we have about young people and radicalisation. I'll play it for you now, and I really hope the sound works. If it doesn't, if somebody could jump in and let me know.
Sound's not working for me, or am I the only one?
I can't see anything or hear anything.
I can't hear or see anything either.
Okay, so I gather that some of you weren't able to see that film then, which is a real shame. So what we'll do in a moment is just pop a link to that film in the chat so that you can have a look at it after the session. Can I just check that those colleagues who couldn't see or hear the film, are you able to see the slides, or is that also not working for you?
Yeah, I can see the slides.
You can see the slides. Well, I'm just going to quickly stop presenting and try presenting again and see whether that works. So just bear with me a moment while I do that. So I'm just trying to upload again. Hopefully that will resolve the issue. We'll see. Just bear with me a second. Great. Okay. So can everybody see the slides now?
Yep.
Lovely. Okay, as I say, we'll share the link to that film after the meeting so that you can have a look at that in your own time. So just staying though with the topic of online radicalisation, thought it would be particularly helpful to highlight a local case study. So in March 2021, a 16-year-old boy from Cornwall was sentenced at the Old Bailey, having previously pleaded guilty to 12 terrorist act offences. The 16-year-old was socially isolated and emotionally undeveloped after experiencing significant adverse childhood experiences. He was active in online neo-Nazi networks, spaces where he could mask his age and real identity, and in this way he was able to lead and actually recruit others. After first joining extremist forums in 2018, the teenager followed the digital signposts into more private chat groups occupied by people from around the world. Within months, he was creating the UK version of a neo-Nazi group called Führerkrieg Division, also known as FKD, which, unknown to him, was led by an even younger boy from Estonia. FKD, which has since been banned or proscribed as a terrorist organisation in the UK, is one of several similar groups to first emerge online. The neo-Nazi ideology promoted by FKD is at the furthest end of the extreme right. Following the boy's sentencing at the Old Bailey, Chief Superintendent Jim Pearce from Devon and Cornwall Police said that the young age of the offender, combined with the extreme hatred displayed and the quick progression of his role within the worldwide extremist group, brings into sharp focus the real and clear danger of online radicalisation. So this was just across in Cornwall. There are, of course, it's worth highlighting, other routes into radicalisation. It's not all happening in the online space, and these are just some examples of the other routes in. So in terms of methods, it's important to bear in mind that this is ultimately a form of exploitation. So it can involve people being influenced and coerced into extremism. As already covered, people can be radicalised in many ways, including through the internet, social media, online gaming sites, and that's led to an increase in the number of individuals becoming what's known as self-radicalised, which is where radicalisation takes place without direct influence from another person. So, for example, through accessing and viewing extremist content online. This in turn has heightened a risk for the UK around self-initiated terrorism, which is where an individual could potentially prepare or carry out an act without direct influence from another person. So what factors might make someone more susceptible to radicalisation? There are a number of factors that are at play in relation to this. And just to reiterate again, there is no single pathway. However, often when these factors, some of which are highlighted here, particularly where they're combined, that might heighten susceptibility. And we know from experience, for instance, that of these factors, social isolation is one of the most influential. So thought it would be really helpful to highlight some of the signs, some of the many signs to look out for. Obviously, in doing so, it's really important to remember that context is key. So no one of these on its own would necessarily cause concern, but obviously combined, and where there are other concerns that sit alongside that, it's worth following up to see whether there is genuinely a cause for concern, or whether there are other reasons why some of these changes might be happening. So as I say, these are some of the signs that we'd encourage you to look out for. So really importantly then, moving on to what to do if you actually identify any of those concerns. How do you raise those? So we have got a process in Devon, it's replicated all across the country. We can share this referral flow chart in the chat. If you're a professional working within another local authority area, so whether you're in Torbay, Plymouth or elsewhere, you might have an ever such slightly different referral flow chart because it will be aligned to your local safeguarding processes. But essentially, it's worth stressing that it's possible to intervene during the radicalisation process and stop someone becoming drawn towards terrorism or supporting violent extremist ideology. So if you believe that someone is at risk of radicalisation, you can take action to help them access support and prevent them potentially from becoming further involved or as worst case scenario, becoming involved in terrorism or advocating or supporting terrorism. And you can do that through raising a prevent referral. So prevent is one part of the government's overall counter-terrorism strategy contest. And the aim of prevent is to tackle the ideological causes of terrorism, intervene early to support people susceptible to radicalisation, and enable those who have already engaged in terrorism to disengage and rehabilitate. And again, the earlier the concerns are raised, the greater the opportunity to intervene and safeguard both the individual you're concerned about as well as potentially others that could come to harm. So in the first instance, we encourage you to raise your concerns with your line manager or safeguarding lead. And if following that conversation, a prevent referral is believed to be required, then we encourage you to contact the local counter-terrorism policing team for guidance. They'd always prefer to have contact ahead of prevent referrals being raised so that you can chat that through. And then following that, if deemed to be necessary, obviously go on to then make a prevent referral. It's really important to stress that if you're raising concerns in relation to anyone under the age of 18, then it's important that you also take steps to raise a request for support. Again, that's all detailed within the referral flowchart. Similarly, if you're making a prevent referral regarding an individual over the age of 18, who may be a parent, carer or guardian to someone else living in the same household as them who is under the age of 18, we would also still need you to raise a request for support alongside the prevent referral. So that is essentially at a high level what you need to do if you identify that you've got concerns. So because this is literally a whistle-stop tour, and we could go into a lot more detail, but there isn't time today as this is bite size. I'm just sharing a few resources that you can tap into to expand your knowledge in this area. So there is Prevent e-learning that the government has made available that is accessible for anyone who wishes to learn more about this. It's particularly relevant for those people working in sectors covered by the prevent duty, such as education, health, local authorities, police, those working in the criminal justice. However, other sectors not covered by the prevent duty can also access and complete this training. Similarly, and again, we can share this after the session, but there's a whole range of additional learning and resources that you can tap into. If you're interested in looking at some further kind of short films relating to this area, then on the Government's Act Early website, they've got a number of real stories that have been animated, covering a range of kind of ideologies and concerns. And that's often a really useful way of looking at something if you haven't got a huge amount of time. And then just finally, to finish with professional curiosity. So really just the importance to remember that anyone can be radicalised. There's no single pathway through to radicalisation. However, some factors, and particularly when combined in combination, can make someone more susceptible. So it's important to know what some of the signs might be to look out for. And then if you do have concerns, make sure that you raise those, check to see whether they're genuine, understand the context, and if appropriate, share those concerns by raising a relevant referral. And again, acting early is key. And that's it from me.
Julie, thank you, and perfect timing. A really informative presentation to kick us off this afternoon. And just to reassure everybody, the presentations and informations will be sent out to everybody that's registered. We'll be sending an email out next week, and this recording will be placed on the YouTube for our community safety partnerships. You'll have the link to that. So thank you, Julie. Hopefully you'll still be around for any questions at the end. But if I could now come to Jen Harris-Nelson, who's going to talk to us about preventing exploitation in adolescents. Thanks, Jen.
No worries. Thank you very much. And it's good to see people. I'm just going to get the slide up, so if people can just let me know when they can see that.
Yep, can see that, Jen.
Okay, right. It's just, there we go. Oh, it's on some sort of slow go, so bear with. Okay, so afternoon, everybody. I'm Jen Harris-Nelson. So I'm one of the REACH team managers, which is Devon Children's Services Missing and Exploitation Service. So I'm talking about preventing exploitation in adolescents, and probably our starting point is we need to think about what we mean by adolescence. So some of these images I've put on here may align with sort of images that pop into your own head. So teenagers that don't get on with their parents, friendship groups in all their various forms, young people who may be isolated and struggling with their emotions, and young people who have constantly got their noses in their phones, and the sort of the relevance of social media and the selfie sort of culture that has developed over the last decade or so. But adolescence is so much more than this, and it's really important that we understand this because it is a period of significant change that all human beings go through. And during this period, there are changes across a number of domains, including physical, emotional, social, and cognitive development. And it's a long period. It's over a decade, starting between the ages of 10 to 12 years, depending on what research you read, and up to the mid-20s. And there's some new research coming out that's suggesting it actually goes up to around 30. And the significance of this is it is a period where there is major brain development and maturation. So similar to early childhood, where there is the sort of synaptic pruning and the plasticity in the human brain, we see a similar kind of thing happen during teenage and adolescent years. And one of the major parts of the brain that is starting to develop is what we call the prefrontal cortex. Now, this is the area that as adults puts the brakes on our behaviour. It allows us to rationalise, it controls our perceptions, it helps us understand consequences. The reality is for particularly teenagers and young adults is that part of the brain is not fully formed, and therefore that impacts on their ability to navigate certain situations. So when you think you've got a young person that does something that you think, oh, what were they thinking? Why did they do that? The reality is they weren't thinking because that part of the brain hasn't yet fully formed. It's also a really important period of time in terms of achieving a sense of identity. And again, as human beings, we all seek this. We all seek to belong. This is about them understanding, making sense of their world and where they belong within it, developing their value systems, their belief systems. And absolutely, as we move forward through that, the roles of family and peers change. So as young people become more autonomous, more independent, and spend more time out of the home, the family has a slightly different role, and peer relationships become incredibly important, and are also linked back to that young person achieving that sense of identity and belonging. And we come on to risk taking. Risk taking is an absolute normal part of the adolescent journey. It's how, as human beings, we learn to understand what the boundaries are of our world in terms of our safety. And while all of this is going on, and teenagers are dealing with all of this, and our adolescents and all the hormones that are flying around, what they're also trying to do is trying to navigate different systems, contexts, and social fields. Again, if you think about your own life, you will be part of a work environment. You will have different friendship groups. You will have family. You may have hobbies. Within each of those social fields, you will adapt your behaviour to the rules of that particular social field in order to fit in order to have status, in order to progress. And young people are trying to do exactly the same thing with all of this change going on. And for some young people, they're trying to adapt simply to survive. So when we come to working with individual young people around sort of really thinking about how we prevent exploitation, the starting point is recognising that it is a form of abuse. And in whatever guise it comes, whether that be online, peer-to-peer, or from adults to children, it is a form of abuse and it is not acceptable. But what we will see is the importance of partnership working. No one agency or individual can solve this on their own, can respond to this on their own. This is where it's really important that partners come together to share information, to collaborate, to work alongside and with that family and with that young person in order to come up with a coordinated plan, both around protection, but also about developing resilience and safety. And trusted relationships and understanding the experiences and listening and hearing those experiences is absolutely key. If you read any piece of research around what does and doesn't work within exploitation, trusted relationships is an ever present in terms of it being a critical part of any work with young people. It's those trusted relationships that will enable young people to talk about things that worry them, to maybe even make disclosures. But it's also that the vehicle through which we're able to have those conversations with young people that often may be really challenging, really difficult, and might even be about challenging their entire belief systems or how they see a particular situation or important part of their life. And identifying and addressing the vulnerabilities is a really key part. We sometimes fall into the habit of we see a particular behaviour from a young person and we respond to the behaviour, rather than really trying to understand what drives that behaviour in the first place. What is that underlying vulnerability? And normally it will stem from some form of unmet need. And the reason why it's really important to kind of respond to that is because the work around the behaviour is often a sticking plaster. It doesn't change things over time. It's those underlying driving factors that will continue to create vulnerability. Those underlying unmet needs are also what perpetrators will target. We heard in that video just about that young person being sort of isolated, not having people believe with them. And what perpetrators will do is they'll put that arm around the shoulder. You're brilliant. We've got you. You're really important to us. You're amazing. All of that stuff. That's how grooming works. So we need to think about how we are responding to young people and understanding and meeting unmet need. And we also need to understand the impact of trauma for our young people, particularly through adolescence, because again, it has a significant impact on brain development. So for young people who have experienced trauma, there are different parts of the brain that are really active, and it's a self-preservation survival response. So again, when we may see a young person who we deem to be behaving in a negative way, actually they may well be behaving in a way that they have a blueprint of is about ensuring their own safety and warding away any threat towards that safety. And the challenges around inequalities, exclusion and discrimination, again, we need to be really mindful of these and really have these as central to our thinking around what's impacting on young people. These are the things that marginalise young people. These are the things that impact on a young person's access to services, to opportunities, and also impacts on their sense of belonging. Again, things that perpetrators will try and target. And I think sort of overall, in terms of working with individual young people, we work at the moment on a very deficit-based model. So we focus on risk, we're risk averse. What we're trying to move towards is about how do we develop safety and resilience? How do we be strengths-based when we're working with that young person? So I just want to move on a little bit more broadly. So that was the sort of about the individual young person. But what we know is young people do not live in a vacuum. They are part of a family unit, they will be part of peer groups, and they'll be part of school environments and neighbourhood environments. And what contextual safeguarding is about is moving beyond the work around the individual to look at, can we intervene in the context where that harm takes place? So can we make spaces and places and peer groups safer and more resilient to harm? And what is really sort of notable about this, and it was obviously just mentioned in Julie's presentation, is the relevance of social media that goes through all domains of a young person's life. So in terms of working with those contexts, as I say, it's about intervening with the context so that the peer group or the neighbourhood or the school becomes the subject of that plan and that intervention. And what that's about is about creating safety in those spaces and places. What it also is about is disrupting perpetrators. You could argue that if there were no perpetrators, there would be no risk of harm. So it's really, really critical that we are working to address the behaviour of perpetrators, because we can work with a child or a peer group or a school and then create safety. Those perpetrators will move elsewhere and target other children and other environments. And again, similar to working with individual young people, partnership working and collaboration is absolutely key. And when I talk about partnerships, and this also is for the individual young people, this is also about seeing parents and carers as partners. So moving away again from the traditional child protection model where we blame or assign responsibility for harm with parents, to understand that the harm is perpetrated by somebody that's outside of that home, and often parents and carers have very little or no influence over that. And extending the idea of partnership beyond traditional agencies. And this is where the sort of the contextual approach can be quite exciting. So rather than having just your core agencies around the table when you're talking about a neighbourhood or a school, what you might also be doing is you might be thinking about you might be able to be thinking about parks wardens, you might be thinking about the street pastors, you might be thinking about the people that manage the car parks, you might be thinking about McDonald's managers. Wherever there is harm taking place in spaces and places, who is in that space, what organisations are in that space that can help contribute to creating safety? Hotelier has been a really good example of that as well. And within this, our community safety partners are a standard partner and are really critical to the work that we do. So I'm just going to finish off on how you would access the support, and I can update this slide to put sort of email addresses and websites on here. But in terms of individual young people where we've got concerns around emerging or active exploitation, you would follow the normal routes in terms of early help and safeguarding pathways. So that may well include the Children's Services Front Door, which is formerly known as MASH. We also have the Missing and Child Exploitation Forum, of which there are 3 of across the county that meet on a monthly basis. And the focus of these meetings is to disrupt adults of interest and individual locations of concern. And also we can discuss individual young people where risk is emerging, share information really early and try and support the lead practitioner to put together a comprehensive plan of support for that young person. And then finally, we have our adolescent safety framework, and this relates more to the sort of the contextual safeguarding, where we can pull a multi-agency meeting or a partnership meeting around a peer group, around a particular neighbourhood or a state or even a town or around a school. And what happens within these is it's the peer group, the neighbourhood or the school that becomes the subject, not the individual young people in it. And neighbourhood and school conferences don't actually discuss any individual children or adults, which is what allows us to bring in organisations into the safeguarding response that we wouldn't ordinarily have potentially sat around the table if it was an individual child, for example, in a child protection meeting. And again, whistle stop tour. And that's me done.
That's a cracking whistle stop tour. Thank you, Jen. You've covered a huge amount of ground and it's great to hear it. We're already linking through to the other presentations. None of this stuff is in isolation. So thank you so much again. Hopefully you'll stay around for the questions and we'll be able to share any of that information out as an email next week. So our next speaker is Inspector Ian Stevens, who's going to be talking to us about criminal exploitation. Ian is the partnership inspector that works across our area. So without further ado, Ian, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Smashing. Thanks, Becca. Becca, am I sharing my screen? Because I'm.
Yes, you are.
You know what my IT skills are like.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I've got a few minutes just to have a chat through with the group today in relation to sort of criminal exploitation. I'm also going to be touching on sexual exploitation because they're not standalones, they are intrinsically linked. So what I'm going to cover off is just the definitions of criminal and sexual exploitation. I'm going to go into a few slides in relation to some of the resources that we've got that we share with partner agencies and our colleagues in like the business and the entertainment communities, which identifies kind of the themes and the trends of what we see in relation to exploitation. I'm then going to have a quick chat around some of the things that we're doing to tackle exploitation and raise awareness of it, and then also some of the referral mechanisms which are out there, which are probably been largely touched on already, but it's not going to harm to go over them again. So hopefully on the screen, I'm sharing the definitions of criminal exploitation and child sexual exploitation, because that's always a good place to start. Looking at the criminal exploitation, we see a lot of it in relation to the county lines drug supply model. That is well advertised in the media, highlighting the advertisers. Highlighted in the media, I should say, and on our news channels, and we still see the effects of county lines drug supply in sunny South Devon and across the peninsula at this moment in time. Essentially, criminal exploitation occurs when an individual or a group takes advantage of an imbalance of power to coerce, control, manipulate, deceive a child or young person under the age of 18 into doing something that they ordinarily would not want to do. And listening to the other presentations, that is the theme around exploitation. It is that imbalance of power to coerce, control, manipulate, or deceive an individual into doing something which, like I said, they wouldn't ordinarily get involved in. It's an interesting area of work, something which I'm involved with on a day-to-day basis, because even if the activity appears consensual, there will be exploitation there, because the individual who's involved may not always identify themselves as being exploited. They may be going along with the group. However, where you have other people who have that ability and that opportunity, the imbalance of power to get them to do something, that is still exploitation. It doesn't always involve physical contact, can also occur through the use of technology. Moving on to child sexual exploitation, I think Jen picked up on part of it is around that it is child sexual abuse. So although it is a standalone offence, we are also dealing with some very serious and invasive offences which have long-term impact and trauma-related impacts on our young people. Again, it occurs where an individual or a group takes advantage of an imbalance of power. So we've got that theme again, to coerce, manipulate, deceive a young person or a child under the age of 18 into an activity in exchange for something the victim needs or wants, or financial advantage or increased status of the perpetrator or facilitator. The victim may also be sexually exploited even if the sexual activity appears consensual. And we do see situations across the area whereby images are shared online and with a view of blackmailing and taking advantage of individuals and getting them to do something. And sometimes we see it where one group may hold such images and use that as a threat to get people to do things which ordinarily they wouldn't want to do. So that's just touching on some of the definitions around the kind of the offences that we're dealing with there. Moving along, okay. Hopefully, I can. Becca, can you help me out? Are you seeing a different slide now?
Yeah, I am.
Great stuff. Okay, so these are some of the resources that we have for some of the work that we've got ongoing at the moment. This one is one that we can distribute to people involved in the taxi industry. It's quite colourful. It grips people's imagination, and it's very to the point in relation to the signs and the things that we have come across. And the signs that we would ask sort of taxi drivers and people in that industry to think about when they're picking up their fares. So children and vulnerable adults are being exploited by criminals, forced to courier drugs and money. The county lines model, commit other crimes. Sometimes they're used for sex, and we need obviously the help of that industry to tackle it. So what we have seen, we've seen taxis which are booked for lone children and young people from outside the area. Taxis booked to take children and young people from to a hotel and other venues to meet adults who do not seem to be family members. Taxis collecting and dropping off children or young people reported to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Dropping or picking up young people from the homes of known or vulnerable people, and customers collected and quickly returned to the same locations. Actually, if we've got people working in certain industries, and I'll come on to some of the resources that we use for like the entertainment, fast food and hotels, what this is something that we are asking people to read, understand, and actually when they see these situations where they are asking, having bookings to pick people up or move people around who may be under the influence, or dropping a person off at an address, being asked to wait for half an hour and then coming back to pick up. Or even picking people up and then taking them from address to address where it's obvious they're making deliveries. We're asking people out in our communities to give us a ring or to submit the intelligence to us through our information sharing portal, because these are the things that we need to know, and it helps us then to put disruptions in place and to do our inquiries. Signs to look for. Like I said, highlighted lone children or young people from outside our local areas. So like with the county lines models, we do know that we do see young people coming into our area to progress the supply of illegal substances and then leave. Similarly, we do see people coming into our area and using local youngsters to work on their behalf. Individuals with multiple mobile phones or tablets, young people with more money and expensive clothing than they can account for. Children and young people take taxis to hotels or other venues to meet adults who do not seem to be family members. Children and young people to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs. The ask there is actually, if you see unusual behaviour or anything that makes you suspicious, then please tell someone. This resource is aimed at residents living in localities or in communal, those kind of buildings where there's multi-occupancy. But in relation to this, we're looking at residents who are anxious, frightened, or showing signs of neglect or displaying other behaviours that would make people worried, residents who appeared guarded around particular individuals in properties, shouting violence or antisocial behaviour at the properties, or not seeing residents for a long period of time. Like I've highlighted, we do see this in South Devon. And through the resources like this, we're looking to raise awareness within certain sectors of our communities. So they are our eyes and ears, feeding the information back to us, helping us with our inquiries. I've touched this on this side. Let me see where we go next. Let's have a look at this one here. This one I think is around our fast food restaurants. So this is where we're raising awareness and situations where children and young people are being bought food and drinks by older adults, or whom they seem to see as a boyfriend or girlfriend. Children and young persons who are out late at night with older adults who do not seem to be family members. Adults trying to hide the fact that they're with a young person, and also adults approaching and trying to befriend young people they do not know. We have found that a lot of our late night economy food outlets, they do know their clients, they do see people coming back on regular times. What we're also looking for them to report to us is anything out of the ordinary. So if they see a group of young people normally and they're fine, then all of a sudden they turn up with a group and they come across as being quite guarded and a little bit upset or worried, then again, those are the signs that we're looking for our colleagues in the community to raise with us, that we can then take steps and put some disruptions in place. These resources are really key to a piece of work that we did a few years ago across Torbay in relation to what's known as Make Safe, where we went out to hotels and guest houses using these resources to raise awareness of what exploitation looks like, both criminal and sexual. We have seen situations across our area where hotel rooms and short-term holiday lets are being taken over for the supply of controlled substances and other such activities. Thankfully, doesn't happen too often, but we are hopeful that by raising awareness of it, that when a situation does arrive, it gets recognised early, and the referrals necessary are made into us at the most opportune moment, and allows us to put the disruptions in place and see what we could do from a safeguarding perspective. We're hoping to run another Make Safe over the next couple of weeks within the Torbay area, and that planning is in place at the moment. What people can do, or what we're hoping people can do going forwards, is if they see something and the hairs on the back of their neck stand up, then tell us. I know Jen mentioned the term professional curiosity. That is critical, because as professionals, we see things, we hear things all the time, and it's so important that that information is fed back to us. We've got our online information sharing portal, which hopefully you're all aware of. If not, then the link can be sent out. We've got the MASH, multi-agency safeguarding hub, where the safeguarding referrals go into. That's staffed by a police officer as well, so the information sharing is there. Jen touched on the MACE. That's a really important forum for us around tackling exploitation, but looking at locations and adults of interest and perpetrators. I'll probably leave it there because it's such a big topic. I just wanted to give a flavour of what the definitions were, or are, I should say, and also some of the signs to link in with. If anyone wants a copy of the resources, then I'm really happy to share them as and when. Becca, I know you put your camera on, so I'm coming to an end.
Okay, thanks very much. That's great. And if you could just send the resources to me, we'll make sure we send them out next week with the email on all the other stuff. So again, thank you for your time and presentation, Ian, and hopefully you can stay for the end. The next presentation is actually me talking to you for 10 minutes, and I'm going to be talking to you about Let's Talk. So Let's Talk is an initiative that's been developed in South Devon, but we're actually deliver across the whole of the locality, across Devon. We've got no geographic boundaries, so anybody can join us. It's all about empowering parents. It's around raising awareness around the community safety risks. Exploitation is a massive part of that we're talking about this afternoon, that young people face. But it's also at the heart of it is what Jen's been talking around. It's getting parents to be safeguarding partners in that context of the wider community, as well as supporting young people in how they navigate the online world and those sorts of things. So I'm just going to tell you a little about the project and give you a direction to some of our resources. So what we believe. So we believe that parents want their children to succeed. So hopefully everybody can see the next slide. It's dragging on mine, but I think other people can see the next slide. We believe that every parent wants their child to thrive. They don't always have the capacity or at that time because of their own trauma or their own challenges, or also they don't have the knowledge. So what we want to do is support parents to be able to support their children to thrive. We definitely see parents and carers as part of the solution, not the problem. For too many years, we saw and heard professionals judging parents around their role. But again, as Jen talked about, we want to take a strengths-based approach in supporting families to come up with some solutions themselves and making sure that our families are strong against all the risks and challenges that our young people face. We want interventions at the earliest possible opportunity and to make sure that those messages are universally available to families so that we can get in at that earliest possible opportunity. Our whole approach is built around the core values of communication and also encouraging love within families, and helping families through that process. The approach that we deliver, the Let's Talk sessions, are around just giving people information without frightening them, but treating them as professional partners that they need to know the facts, but also around giving simple tips and techniques and how to empowering them to actually take action rather than frightening them and walking away again. We want to take a really relaxed approach in our delivery. So the partners that we use to deliver the sessions, we make sure we'll do that in a very jargon-free way. And it's really important that people can join our sessions anonymously. It's not a parenting course, it's around information for parents. So the next slide tells us a little bit around what we cover. And I won't go through in detail all of the sessions, you can see that there. We amalgamate those different topics into a number of key sessions. Some of the ones that are on there obviously specifically relate to exploitation around the community risks. Ian's already mentioned county lines and gang crime, but also child sexual exploitation and grooming that comes through unhealthy relationships. But you will actually find that the majority of these topics actually touch on exploitation and also help communities and parents and carers build that resilience in their young children against exploitation. It's also about emotional well-being and self-care for parents. So that's some of the content we cover. There was a question in the chat around safety planning. Safety planning is a key element of our delivery in Let's Talk. The delivery, how do we do it? So we do have toolkits available online, and again, we'll send this out to you in the email next week. We do live sessions online. We also do recorded sessions, and we have bite-sized recorded sessions, so smaller chunks of information available on our YouTube. Again, we'll send you the links to those. We have delivered sessions focused on the parents and carers for teenagers, pre-teens, primary, but also around Let's Growing Up in a porn culture and also hypersexualized social media. So the next slide shows you the sorts of things that we have on our YouTube channel. That's expanding all the time. So people can go in at a time to suit them to see the information that they need. So the toolkit that we've mentioned has specific, as well as the online delivery, the actual toolkit has specific information around exploitation, and that's currently available on the Safer Devon Partnership website. Again, the link will come out to that. So in relation to delivery so far, we've had nearly 7,000 engagements. So what that tells us is parents really want to engage with us in supporting their children. Our journey and delivery for this started in April 2021. We're still going, and we intend to go an awful lot further and get to as many parents as possible. So what does nearly 7,000 parents looks like? Well, it looks like 348 full classrooms or 128 buses, 124 buses full of people. We're really delighted that we've got that message to 5 auditoriums of the Theatre Royal, and again we want that to continue and grow all the time. So our feedback, we have pretty unanimous support that parents and carers would recommend to other parents, which is really valuable feedback for us. And we also know that by far the majority of people that attend our sessions feel that they are better able to support their child, and also that we're getting good ratings. We've got hundreds and hundreds of quotes, but we've just added 2 on the slide here, because one of the things that we hear really frequently from our parents is being able to join these sessions help them feel less isolated. Parenting is incredibly difficult and it can feel really, really isolating. So it's important that we reach out and support parents, and the online service does seem to be working. So this gives me a few minutes to talk about our future. There's a couple of people, so Jenny and Julie that you've already heard from are on our Let's Talk board in helping take us forward, and we're looking for more and more specialists all the time to work with us to make sure that we're doing the best that we can. We're working on developing a charitable status so that we can try and attract some funding to be able to deliver more and more. We're working on a business plan. We've got a theory of change, making sure that we're really focusing on the areas that we need to work on to try and generate that change and safety within the community. And we've got a couple of specialist sessions coming up. So one of our concerns is around some of the areas of risks. We can see some increased susceptibility for young people who are gender neurodiverse. And part of that is because of that online risk. So we're working really closely. We had a focus group last night. We've got a focus group tonight with parents and carers of young people who ascend are neurodivergent to help us design those sessions. So we'll be delivering those sessions in July, and we're also looking at delivering sessions specifically around dads and male role modelling. So we only had about 20% of those 7,000 engagements that we've had so far have been from dads and carers. And again, we acknowledge that dads and carers have got a massively positive role to play in safeguarding the children within their families. So we are going to be looking for dads and carers to work with us on our focus groups to make sure that that's the best offer that we can possibly give. And we're also looking at developing a website to host all of our information. So lots and lots of work to come. For those of you that are on our mailing lists for Let's Talk, you will get all of this flagged out. We use social media to advertise, but if you would like to go on a mailing list, again, with the information that we send you out next week, you'll have the opportunity to make sure you hear about our sessions as they come live. So lots more to see from us. We're really excited about the engagement. And if we're going to get solutions to exploitation, we need really strong communities. And our parents and our carers are an incredibly valuable partner in that contextual safeguarding. So without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to Jeannie Lynch, who we're delighted could join us this afternoon. Jeannie comes from CoLab and Exeter and is the guru and fount of all knowledge in relation to what she's going to be talking to us about this afternoon. So hand over to you, please, Jeannie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My goodness me, what a I can't speak. So I'm just as we always do during these kind of things, I'm just going to share my screen and get the technicals up and running. So give me just a sec. And just before I do that, actually, I just really want to say what an amazing session it's been so far. Absolutely fantastic in terms of the content that we've heard so far. I just want to pull this up. Sorry, I'll just be a moment. Here we go. Can people see that? I can't see you now, so if someone can just
Jeannie,
see it.
yes, Jeannie, we can.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, so thanks for that. So my name's Jeannie Lynch. I'm manager of CoLab Women, which is based in Exeter. We are part of a multi-agency health and wellbeing centre that supports people in the city, particularly those with multiple disadvantage and complex needs. And we manage the Women's Project, which is called CoLab Women. And as part of that, we have various work streams in terms of what we do, and this has been a key part of it for several years. So we started in 2017, predominantly supporting women in the justice system, and we've always had a local women's centre approach within, as I said, a multi-agency health and wellbeing hub that includes health, probation, mental health, substance misuse, drug and alcohol services, whole range of wellbeing offers, positive activity. And our current work at the moment, which has kind of been born of some of the work we've been doing over the past few years as a project called Brave Spaces, and that's specialist support for women who are homeless, rough sleeping, and who are also experiencing domestic and sexual violence and abuse. And we support women in what we describe as a whole women first approach. And again, coming back to what was mentioned earlier on there about assets based, we focus on what's strong, not what's wrong, and try to support women towards recovery. Now, it's been, as I said, a fantastic seminar so far. I'm really interested that we are just in terms of the ages, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So we work predominantly with women aged 18 plus, but we have over the last year focusing on 16 plus as well in that transition age. But just to kind of give you a flavour of sort of numbers, CoLab has about 2,000 visitors a month, and about a third of those are women. So this is a significant number. So between February 22 and March 23, the Women's Project supported 793 women directly through a whole range of different options, such as groups, drop-ins, etc., with 170 on our caseload and 45 in our Women's Supported Emergency Housing Project. And you can just see there, I won't go through in detail some of the vulnerabilities, but when you kind of bring all these two together, and women are presented with a multiplicity of issues, having that whole women approach is incredibly important. And again, just looking at the complexity here, as you'll see at the bottom, what became apparent quite early on was that there was a high number of women who were at risk of sexual exploitation. So again, just to kind of compound that, in 2016, Exeter had the second highest number of people outside of London who were rough sleeping, and a third of those were women. The only other place was Brighton. And the photograph here is a photograph that was sent to me by a local authority officer during the first lockdown, where she said, we're working with this woman, this is where she's sleeping, this is where she's sex working. What are we going to do about it? Or I think what she said was, what are you going to do about it? And I was kind of thinking, just look at that photograph. It's such, it just explains, it just displays such vulnerability. But it really started as it kind of really got things moving in terms of beginning to develop an approach. And just checking in with one of my colleagues this morning, 35% of people in the STAR project, which is a specific project that supports people around rough sleeping and substance misuse, continue to be women. So we're still seeing high degrees of vulnerability. Now, we talked earlier on about risk factors in terms of young people. One of the things that really strikes me is that we talk about sexual exploitation to the age of 18, and then it's like people are adults and they have free choice around what happens next. And even in the context of what we're talking about today, in terms of vulnerable adults, I think again that there is a whole cohort of society that we probably aren't describing as vulnerable adults, and are somehow seeing it as being somehow complicit or making choices, etc. The reason for showing you this slide here is because the work that we developed in Exeter started with this toilet block, where we became aware at one stage where there were women being taken in and out on a regular basis, and men waiting for them, and taking the women in, women who were homeless, who had substance misuse issues, back out again 10 minutes, and another woman. And that was kind of like, if you think about it in terms of choice, vulnerability, risking, risk factors and safeguarding, that is a harsh reality of what we're talking about here. And since we started to work, it's been really interesting in terms of it as a very, it's not something that people in Devon particularly want to talk about, because that's not what happens here, There are very few local support mechanisms. It's really good ones, like organisations such as Edison and others in Trevi and Plymouth, who have been doing this work for a while, but there's a real notion around it doesn't happen here, that people are hidden in plain sight, but because of the nature, particularly around the Exeter area or maybe some of the rural areas, you don't see it, but it's all around. And also media stigma and sensationalisation really doesn't help, and the system itself is reluctant to recognise that this goes on. So I just wanted to point that out, because that has been a key factor. So we started off recognising from the toilet scenario that I just showed you there. There was stuff going on around us. So we ran a seminar with local agencies and the Nelson Trust, and we did a big piece of research. Now, one of the key factors in this slide here is when we talk about child sexual exploitation is that 73% of the women who took part in that initial survey were aged 18 to 24. And, it doesn't, it doesn't beg a belief that nobody woke up on their 18th birthday and thought this is where life is going to go. They're obviously been involved before. So that transition age is something that we're really keen to explore further with partners such as yourselves. But I just think that's quite a significant statistic. And it was a very live issue, as you can see from the women at that point as well. So in terms of sexual exploitation, and again, language has changed over the years. I used to describe it as sex working, but I don't anymore, because what we were talking about, or what we are talking about, is exploitation, again, due to some of the factors that Ian mentioned there. But in terms of having, economic and financial pressure, debt, with a mix, substance misuse, homelessness, lack of training, employment opportunities, a whole toxic mix has meant that women have often found themselves with no other options but to get involved in having to sell sex to survive, in effect, and particularly looking at women who are homeless. As you can see there, the whole issue around, rough sleepers, women fleeing domestic abuse, fleeing, feeling safer in the street. But we know that the risks that go with homelessness as well are just absolutely huge. That's one of the key things that I've been working on over the last couple of years. And again, in terms of choice, if this was a 14-year-old, we would be doing something. But if this is women aged 25 and beyond, the numbers who were reporting sexual violence from the men who were controlling them, and as well as the men who were buying sex off them, and then also the clients as well. That is huge, and it didn't, in terms of the kind of numbers of crimes or the nature of the crimes that were involved, it was pretty significant. So a lot of women. These are the facts, but some of the stuff is that women tell us that they're really, really, really scared to talk to people about this because of the fear of stigma, having their children removed, not being able to talk to staff, being blamed for themselves. It's just what she does. She does it to get her drugs. We just turn a blind eye and let her get on with it, and that is not good enough. And one of the things I always talk about again is that if it was your sister or your niece or your mum or your auntie, would it be okay? No, it wouldn't, and it's not okay for the women that we're talking about here either. So coming to the crunch, for me, the real issue here, which is there is statutory definition of child sexual exploitation. There is none for adult sexual exploitation. But this form of exploitation and abuse doesn't end when a person turns 18 and will often continue into adulthood if it's not initiated during adulthood. And again, coming back to Ian's point, it's due to limited circumstances, huge levels of coercion, manipulation and force. And what we need to do really is to start to work with that, not least because of the interface between modern slavery, domestic abuse, sexual violence, trafficking, and grooming, the whole things, there's a thread that runs through everything here. And there is some work going on nationally to try and get adult sexual exploitation under the same kind of statutory definition as child sexual exploitation. So we, at the moment, we have produced a toolkit which is called Out of the Shadows. It's a very comprehensive toolkit, and there's been some really lovely feedback on it. Thank you to those of you who have offered that. And again, it's to offer, there are no specific services. There is no national policy. There's no local policy. So we've just really began to get this work going. And the toolkit is in publication. It's also downloadable. I'll give you a link at the end. And it's to try, again, to raise this as an issue. It's a safeguarding issue. It's an adult safeguarding issue. It's around offering support to a whole range of agencies across the board. And what's great for me is that Devon County Council have embedded it as part of their new Devon-wide needs assessment, which is looking at interpersonal gender-based violence and abuse. It's about creating a whole system approach to the issue, but developing a county-wide action plan between 24 and 25. And significantly, again, we have got a pilot and action research training programme running between June and October in different parts of Devon. That will both be in person and online, What we want to do is to create a consistent and embedded approach to supporting communities at risk across the board, and that come 25, when all the new health and other commissions and tenders come into play, including sexual violence, domestic abuse, drug and alcohol, all these different contracts will change in 25, that this issue needs to be embedded all the way through, so that that person or that woman who goes to a drug and alcohol service can get a good response. If she goes to a domestic abuse service, she can get a good response. If she goes to her doctor's surgery, she can get a good response. And rather than leaving people you know, being terrified to talk about this stuff, then they will get, they will get help, understanding and support in a way that they don't at the moment. Again, just to finish, touching on Jen's point earlier on there again, the whole thing around relationships with good support workers, that key person to talk to, that trust that you can build up is just fundamentally important to helping keep adult women safe. So again, sorry, I've been a wee bit nervous here. I'm not entirely sure why, but this is a subject I'm really, really passionate about. And please get in touch, and I'd love to hear from you, and thank you so much.
Jeannie, thanks very much for your time and, as ever, sharing your passion. It is a really uncomfortable picture, but we need to keep talking about it and not make it uncomfortable, because each time I hear you speak, the numbers and the scale, it is harrowing and horrific, and we have to all work together to address it, like the other forms of exploitation that we've been hearing about today. So I'm going to hand back to Julie now, who is going to talk to us about reporting, and I think Ian's going to add some content to that as well. But if I could ask Julie to start, and then we can hand over to Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. So I've just got a couple more slides, which again we'll share with colleagues after the meeting. So this is really in simplistic terms what to do if you've got any concerns. So we've touched on this in relation to several of the presentations today, but I am just going to bring up a slide which summarises this, and then I think, as Becca said, Ian's just going to come in to talk a little bit more about the partner information sharing arrangements that we have in place and the benefits of utilising that as well. So just bear with me. So okay, so hopefully everybody can see that slide. So essentially in Devon, so we've got two principal routes for reporting safety and welfare concerns. So, and that's covered under 3, but essentially if anybody's in immediate danger, then obviously contact 999. The second kind of rundown is if you're concerned about somebody being radicalised, you need to follow your organisation's prevent process or seek advice from the police prevent team. We have got, as I shared earlier, and we'll share it after the meeting, a prevent process referral flow chart that for colleagues working in Devon takes you through that process. But if you've got any doubts, then again, within this slide that we'll share, if you just click on the police prevent team, it will take you through to their contact details. So that is a separate referral route. However, as I mentioned earlier, it's really important that you also raise any relevant concerns through the safeguarding front doors as well. So then any concerns around a child aged under 18, and you need to review the levels of needs framework. Again, there's a link so you can go through and see the further information and make a referral to early help or children's social care as appropriate. In addition to referring to early help or children's social care, if your concerns relate to child exploitation, you may also need to make a missing and child exploitation and MACE submission. Again, the links are provided there. There's a wealth of information on the Devon Safeguarding Children's Partnership, so it's well worth having a look through. Many of the topics that we've covered and touched on today are detailed there, and so there's some really helpful information for professionals and signposting through to additional resources. Similarly, if you have concerns regarding anyone over the age of 18, then you need to follow the steps outlined on the slide. Essentially, consider if they meet the legal threshold for referral under the Care Act, and then take those steps as detailed. And obviously, if safeguarding adults criteria is met, then please refer through to the Devon Safeguarding Adults Service. Again, we have a Devon Torbay and Devon Safeguarding Adults website. And again, that has got a huge amount of really useful additional information covering a range of harms that you might potentially come across. And for again, further signposting and advice around that. And both safeguarding partnerships have been developing some bespoke resources and films around some of the themes that we've touched on today. So again, it's really well worth a kind of look in your free time and look through the Safeguarding Adults. And again, we'll post in just a moment. I'll post the links to both websites, Safeguarding Adults website, and then there's a separate Safeguarding Children's. And then if there's any members of the public that are interested that are kind of looking for information, of course, they can access it through those routes. However, that is tailored more towards professionals, those working with children or adults who might potentially come to harm. So the Safer Devon website actually at a much higher level includes a significant amount of useful information and signposting onto local services in relation again to a range of issues, including exploitation. So I'll pop those links in the chat in just a moment. And if there are no immediate questions, I'll hand over to Ian to cover the partner sharing information, if that's okay, Ian.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Julie. Just going to share my screen. Here we go. Right, can you all see that?
Yep.
Great stuff. Thanks for that. So Devon and Cornwall Police, we have a partner information sharing portal, which is accessed through our website, which hopefully you'll see there, and I'll scroll down in a minute and show you where the link is. This is not for reporting crimes through. It's not for reporting incidents that are ongoing or have occurred. There are separate links for those, and the portal is purely there for sharing information or intelligence. That those sort of situations where the hairs have stood up on the back of your head, or something has piqued your professional curiosity, you can submit it through the portal. It goes directly to our intelligence teams. I like that term, professional curiosity, because sometimes that small little piece of information that you hold may be the final bit in the jigsaw that we're looking for. So please don't hold back on coming forwards and submitting information that you think is relevant, especially in the realms of exploitation, both in terms of adults as well as children. It goes to our intel team. They will do the research. Unfortunately, we're like a big sponge in so much as we soak up all the information, and we often do stuff with it, but sometimes we're not able to feed back because of the sensitivities and the fact it may link in with ongoing operations. But just be reassured that whatever you do submit through the portal is looked at, is reviewed, and could assist us with our ongoing inquiries or operations. So this is the front page of Devon and Cornwall Police website. If you scroll down to the bottom, and there's a little section there that says partners, you click on the partner services. So this has a series of tablets, or I think that's a term is used. So there's one there for reporting a crime or incident, and I won't go through the others because they're all self-explanatory and you can read them at your leisure. But the main one that we promote as often as we can is the Community Partnership Intelligence tab, bottom right. So click on that, and it takes you through a series of prompts and access to the form. So the form is for sharing non-urgent information by partner agencies and include information related to antisocial behaviour, child abuse, community tension, cyber, general crime, hate crime, knife crime. There's a list of stuff there. It does give you links to the anti-terrorist hotline as well, depending on the nature of your inquiry. But you go to the bottom, hit start. It asks you a series of questions around just to really make sure you're not reporting an incident or a crime, and off you go. And I won't go through it because it is self-explanatory. You populate the fields, click next, and it'll take you through the route. Like I said, you may hold the final piece in the jigsaw, so don't hold back on coming forwards and letting us know. It's treated in confidence. You leave your details there, which helps us come back to you if, for instance, our intelligence team needs to make contact to explore further things, or ask you further questions or ask for further help. It's quite a self-explanatory form, but it helps us to generate the information that we need and for us to develop. So there you go. Back to you, Becca.
Brilliant. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Ian. It is self-explanatory. I have filled it in quite a few times, and I'm sure I'll fill it in many more times. It is very easy to use, so I do encourage that. Now's the bit. Hopefully, our speakers are still all online. So if any of you have any questions that you'd like to put to our speakers, or any general questions, then please do put your hand up. I think, does somebody just pop some questions in the chat? So Liz Gold-Lewis, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. I put my camera on. So there's
Brilliant, thank you.
So a couple of questions. One of them was about going back to the first one, which was about radicalisation, I think, and we were talking about in Devon, particularly we're looking at far right wing, sort of the risk of that. And I was wondering about, obviously what happened in Plymouth. I don't know if it's a couple of years ago now, 3 years ago, where there was this incident, was a really horrific incident, which was related to incel sort of ideology. And I didn't know if incel ideology is embedded within far right, or whether that's a separate issue, and whether that's something that we would also be thinking of in terms of radicalisation. And the second question is much longer, so I'll let you read it instead. But it's about how we can access, how children and young people can access support or psychology for to reduce the risk of people pleasing, which might put young people at risk of exploitation by people who choose to exploit them.
Julie, I'm coming to you for the first one.
Yes, so in terms of the question about incel, so just the first thing to say in relation to the Keyham tragic incident in Keyham is that wasn't deemed to meet the threshold for being classified as a terrorist incident. So I think it's really important to stress that there was additional context around that incident, so it was not classed as a terrorist incident. However, absolutely there was lots of reporting at the time around potential influence in relation to activity in incel forums and so on. So incel is included within, it comes under the kind of mixed unclear sort of categorization of ideology, and actually what government is doing at the moment is, instead of kind of grouping lots of things that don't neatly sit in extreme right wing or Islamist extremism or left-wing anarchist, is they're actually kind of beginning to separate out the different elements of the mixed unclear. So now when people put forward prevent referrals, you'll actually begin to see the data that's published nationally, so the open source data. You'll begin to see the government breaking it down, so you'll be able to see how many referrals have come in where the primary concern relates to extremist incel activity, because again I should stress that not all incel activity leans towards that kind of violent extremist end of things. As I mentioned in my presentation, there are a range of themes that come across within the narratives, crossing over multiple ideologies, and one of them is misogyny. So there is a really strong link. So it is definitely, again, if we had longer than the 15 minutes earlier, we could start to kind of get into some of the nuances and some of the things that we'd be hoping that professionals would be sort of keeping an eye out for. So I think absolutely, I think we all know as well that, again, there's conspiracy theories, there's influences. A couple of years ago, there was, I think, a significant spike in prevent referrals, some of which directly relating to kind of Andrew Tate and other influencers in that kind of toxic misogyny space. Very few of them will have met the kind of threshold for prevent, but nonetheless, we are concerned about young people potentially being drawn into something through an influence and then getting pulled into deeper and deeper and the kind of encrypted chat spaces. So yeah, as mentioned by a couple of colleagues, the online space is incredibly unsafe in many ways, and we need to continually evolve our understanding, because it's hard to keep up, isn't it, Jen? I think in terms of influence of social media and so on. So incel, yes, if there were significant concerns around that, and that's potentially leading towards the kind of violent extremist end of things, then absolutely we'd be wanting professionals to raise those concerns. And then obviously the experts in relation to counter-terrorism policing would be looking at that to consider whether or not it was relevant and appropriate for a prevent space. And just to stress, when a prevent referral goes in and the team looks at it, if it doesn't meet the threshold for prevent or onward referral to channel, they will always look at whether or not there are wider safeguarding concerns, and will link in with children's or adults as appropriate around that. And then, sorry, your second question related to, so yes, there's a strong link between kind of adverse childhood experiences and increase and heightened vulnerability and susceptibility in relation to all forms of exploitation, and that carries right through into adulthood, as Jeannie's presentation touched on. I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we're getting better at identifying the kind of themes that sometimes underlie the vulnerability, and thinking about what's the earliest point that we could possibly be intervening. And again, several colleagues here, and Becca and others, are involved in some of the work we're doing, albeit not directly related, but there is a strong link between violence and exploitation in the serious violence space, where we're trying to increase the amount that we're doing upstream in terms of early intervention and prevention. I don't know if that answered. Sorry, I was still reading your message. I don't know if
That's
that
okay. No worries. Jen,
more.
I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, or if we've got any colleagues from CAMS on the line in relation to the level of kind of trauma support and counselling available to young people in the area.
Yeah, so I'll see if there's anybody that wants to sort of, because I want to sort of talk on behalf of CAMS, but if is anybody on the line, if they do want to, that's from health, that would want to comment on that before, so I give sort of my experience of it.
I can't see anybody rushing forward, Jen.
So I think what we know is nationally CAMS is considerably overwhelmed as a service. That's the reality. So actually, for young people who are ready and wanting to access sort of trauma-based therapies, there are likely to be considerable waiting lists, and dependent on sort of where they're at in terms of their life and their mental health presentation. So we do have JACAP, which is the child abuse team that sits under CAMS, and obviously we have CAMS itself, and also through the SARC and Checkpoint, there are workers that work around child sexual abuse and children that have experienced contact offences through sexual exploitation. But again, the reality is those services are overwhelmed. So in terms of ones that people can access that are either through the voluntary sector or through CAMS, it's there, but your waiting lists. And you're absolutely right in terms of sort of those trauma responses, the freeze, flight and friend, or fawn as it's known. They are sort of, when we're talking about preventing exploitation, in an ideal world we would want to be getting in there. I know certainly within children's services we have the therapeutic wellbeing service that can then be accessed. I can't remember what the sort of the legal status of the child needs to be. I think it's for children who are under child in need and child protection, but please don't quote me on that. And again, there's sort of therapeutic sort of wellbeing practitioners available through that. And what's really exciting is they're just employing a couple of practitioners to work with our care experience young people in relation to sort of therapeutic wellbeing. So they're trying to extend that service. Does that answer your question? There's not enough, I think, is the reality, but it's not for the want of services trying.
No, thank you very much. I just didn't know what was out there, and I had a thought that it probably wasn't as easily accessible as we'd like it to be, but thank you for.
Yeah, there are additional sort of emotional wellbeing services through the likes of Young Devon. We signpost people to things like Mind, Young Minds. So that, again, there is online support as well that is available. But in terms of actually a therapeutic program, and I think it probably raises the importance of being trauma aware and trauma informed in our work, because CAMS or a practitioner isn't going to do a magical piece of work. It's about how we all work with young people that have experienced trauma. So how the police respond at the time they pick a missing child up. If that child's been sexually abused, they need to think about putting hands on that child and whether that's appropriate. How the language that we use when we talk about young people, these are all things that can trigger young people. So working with parents to enable them to be sort of around that the PACE model in relation to sort of the curiosity and again being trauma aware and trauma informed as parents and carers.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got 2 more questions, and then I think I'm probably going to have to close this because we're getting close to past. So, Lauren, did you have a question for us? Lauren Brewster. I can see your hand up. No, okay. Can I then come to Irene, please? Irene Wilson.
Yeah, I don't know if my camera's coming out. Oh, there I am, yeah.
Yep.
Mine's a fairly simple one. I think it is anyway. Public health nursing, and obviously always upstream thinking. But I just wondered about the increase in school avoidance we have now, and if that's being addressed in any way of sort of the early help, because they're potential to be the isolated children of the future. Is there any work going on there in regard to Let's Talk and, you know, school exclusion?
Absolutely. So thank you for your question. Absolutely, that's a real driver for us around Let's Talk and supporting parents, because we're really concerned around children that are school avoiders or are now moved to elective home education. We're concerned that from a safeguarding perspective, there aren't adults who are necessarily trained in safeguarding who have eyes on those children, and we're concerned around how those children might be isolated and might be susceptible and vulnerable. It's a specific strand under the serious violence work that Julie's already mentioned, that we work with education in all of its forms to make sure that that's as rich as possible in addressing these sorts of areas and concerns, and also for us as community safety partnerships, liaising with our schools to hear around the trends that we're seeing in relation to the numbers of how that's affecting our communities and how that might again affect the susceptibility and vulnerability of those children. So it's a really important question that you've asked, and it's one that's a real focus for us. I think if you're happy with that as an answer,
yeah,
I'm going to move us on to close. Claire is going to now share a slide for you, which has got the a QR code that you can use on your phone, and Claire's also going to put the link in the chat to a bit of an evaluation form. But whilst we're closing, I just want to say, I live and breathe and eat this every day, and I've learnt lots this afternoon. I am continue to be absolutely inspired by the people that have spoken to you this afternoon, and the passion that there exists within this community of professionals to keep people safe in our communities, to talk about the uncomfortable things, to raise awareness of the uncomfortable things, and to continue to strive for them not to be uncomfortable and for people not to be traumatized by them. As a community safety partnership, we're really passionate about getting information out to people. So we've got a number of bite-sized sessions coming up. In June, we've got one around diversity and hate crime. In July, we're partnering with Public Health Devon to deliver one around suicide prevention. And in September, we're working with the police to deliver one around serious and organised crime, and the role that you as partners can play in helping us tackle serious and organised crime, which sits above all of the things that we've been talking about today. So please do complete the evaluation form and leave your email address if you'd like to go on our mailing list for those other things. I would like to do a massive thank you to Claire, who's sitting actually next to me and squirreling away at all the IT and has been fantastic in helping us bring today to reality. I'd like to do a massive thanks to our speakers who have stayed with us throughout this afternoon, but not just about our speakers this afternoon, as I say, for all the work that is done tirelessly for pretty much 365 days in a year to make a difference in our communities. And I'd like to thank all of you for attending and being part and listening and helping us share that knowledge, share that learning, and help safeguard our communities. So 2 things I want to finish with: be curious, and let's help our communities find those trusted relationships to help keep them safe. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon on behalf of the Community Safety Partnership. Thanks for coming along, thanks for being involved, and hopefully you can enjoy some of our other sessions.